how do we go about sharing our faith in our business? What's effective strategies, and how far is too far?
It applies not only to business owners, it applies to anybody working that has a job.
The size of your business, and then also whether it's like blue collar or white collar, might dictate a little bit your style.
Like, just go ask 3 people about how their life is going, and it is astonishing at the amount of pain and the amount of brokenness. I think you actually have to really ask yourself that in your heart, like, well, do I actually care?
You can answer that question for yourself right now, I think, by saying, how much do I know about my employees and their life? Well, how far do I take it? Like, do I just dump the gospel on them when they, the tear falls down their face and they're like, man, finances are tough. And you're like, well, Jesus is the answer.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like, that's not always, well, it could be effective. I don't know. But there's still the question of like, how do I work my way into that conversation?
You don't want to be that guy. And you might say, well, you can't share enough. But I think just in the way God has made the world, there's also just realities of human interaction and human social appropriateness and whatnot.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Vertical Business Podcast. Today we wanted to talk about a question that Jeff and I get pretty often from people about how we run our businesses, specifically related to our faith. And that question is usually something like, how do I share my faith at work with my employees or with my coworkers? And like, how far is too far? How overt should I be? What kind of strategies should I take? And, Jeff and I, obviously the point of this podcast, and we're all over town, letting everyone know we run our businesses with the intent of being a kingdom outpost. So I think that's why we get that question. We definitely got some opinions. So
Yeah.
Well,
it is kind of an interesting topic. And I think it applies not only to business owners, it applies to anybody working that has a job, right?
Totally.
Because if you're in a workplace, you know Jesus and you want other people to know Jesus, then you're going to hopefully have a proclivity to want to like share your faith with them. But man, I mean, the world we live in, obviously you sort of, especially the last 4 years, you feel like you're treading, on dangerous territory if you even bring it up, honestly. So as a business owner, you're like, dude, am I gonna, how far can I go here? Am I gonna get sued? If I'm too overt, it's my business, but you know how it is. I mean, like, dude, you say the wrong thing, you violate someone's circle, yeah, their bubble, and
whatever they perceive is too far.
Yeah,
in terms of precedent to their personal life or making comments.
I think it is a good. It's a good topic of conversation because there is, and I think it's different for every business, but there is a way of going about it that I think that is good and right, and people know where you stand, and it opens the door without like, nailing up, giant wooden crosses all throughout your office and mandating prayer meetings to start every, employee meeting or something,
Totally.
So
yeah, I was going to say, probably looks different in different types of businesses. I feel like a helpful initial filter might be, seems like what comes to mind immediately is that the size of your business, and then also whether it's like blue collar or white collar, might dictate a little bit your style.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe I'm processing this out loud. Maybe I'll be like, no, that's not true. But feels like in a really professional setting, you might not have the ability to be as overt, which I'd say we're more used to. Whereas opposed to some of like our buddies' businesses or some very successful blue collar, like home service businesses that I know of. We just talked to a guy 2 weeks ago that was telling us he does prayer meetings and Bible studies with his employees like weekly, and then every morning. I feel like I hear that a lot more in the like blue collar space, and I feel like you hear about guys connecting outside of work a lot more
Yeah.
in those scenarios. Like, oh, we have a Bible study, we work out together.
Yeah.
And,
Well, like I've got a buddy who's he's in the beverage industry, and he drives truck and does and sales, but he's rolling around in like a big box van a lot with another guy. So like he's had great conversations because you're rolling down the highway between one town and another, and like life just comes up.
Yeah.
So that's a really conducive environment. But I think specifically we're talking about, well, maybe not just the office environment, but that's probably not true. I think the one thing that's really coming to mind that just hearing you talk is that regardless of the office environment or the work environment you're in, I think the thing that shocks me all the time is that there's just a lot of hurting people out there. And there's just a lot more need, like under the surface of people's lives. They come to work with like a really, like a coating, a shiny coating. And the reality is, man, you talk to more than 3 people. Like just go ask 3 people about how their life is going. And it is astonishing at the amount of pain and the amount of brokenness and the amount of like, you just crack that seal and it's like, oh, well, hey, thanks for asking. My dad just got diagnosed with cancer, or, hey, yeah, actually I've been struggling with this, or, hey, I've had just like having rank anxiety and I can't figure it out. And like, it's really crazy. So
yeah,
like, don't forget that. Don't forget that in your workplace, the people that look like they're sailing along just fine, and you think like they don't need Jesus and they don't even need to hear about this. Like, don't fall into that trap. People want to talk. People have needs in their life.
Yeah.
And we know that the gospel and the peace that comes from that is the antidote for that. And so don't think people don't need it. The question is, how do you get into that conversation with them?
Totally, man. Yeah. If you feel like you're looking for an opportunity, or you don't see it, as you're saying, in your employees' lives, you're probably not pressing down too hard, because as soon as you poke that nudge that at all, it's like overwhelming. At least it has been for me, and I know it's been for you. It's a good way to put it. I mean, just the reality is there's a lot more hurt out there, and there's a lot more need out there than people put off. I mean, most people are putting on a facade, especially in this day and age with, social media, and like the expectation from everybody is that, you want to have this glossed appearance on the outside of your life.
Look like an Instagram life,
Yeah. People don't typically want to put off to everyone else the struggles and the hardships. They want to put off that things are put together. So yeah, if you poke, it definitely, more than enough will come out for you to have, plenty to do. And I think that comes down to just like my perspective on that question is that I think it ultimately just comes down to how much you care, honestly. And it's kind of cliche, or sounds like a easy answer to the question, but I think if you care, then there will be plenty of farming to be done.
People will pick up on that, probably.
People will pick up on it. You will definitely unearth things. And just to be practical, to add some color to what I'm saying, I mean, I think if you care, the way that'll work itself out will begin with the way you approach your employees and the way you approach objectives for the business. And like, instead of just viewing your employees through the lens of achieving, how much I want to take home this year, or revenue goals for the company, which obviously you have to be thinking in those terms. But I think if you really care about your people and you care to share the gospel with them, which means you're following God's instruction to love him and love your neighbor. Mm-hmm. So the loving your neighbor part should come out in the way you approach your employees by understanding what their hopes and dreams and goals are, not just your own. Again, they're not just there to support your dreams as a business owner. If you care enough to understand, like, what is their family makeup? If they have a wife and kids, like, what are they dreaming for their family? They want to buy a house. They're going through this right now. Like that kind of stuff will come out of those conversations. And I think that's just then a natural foundation that gets built to facilitate the kind of conversations that'll be helpful to share the gospel.
Right. I'm hearing ethos. Right.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Culture or ethos. And, I think that, you said it well, which is really obvious, but you actually have to care, which sounds like, well, of course I do, but you can go to, dude, I think you actually have to really ask yourself that in your heart. Like, well, do I actually care? Like, do I actually care about?
You can answer that question for yourself right now, I think, by saying, how much do I know about my employees and their life?
Right.
Do I know who their wives are? Do I know who the kids are? Do I know, generally speaking, where they're trying to go in this position and personally?
Right.
Because I know those things about my employees, and that's not to say like, oh, I've got it figured out. It's just to say, I'm not even really intentional about that. It's just because I'm approaching business from that angle.
Yep.
And so it just comes out naturally.
You want to know.
So if the answer to that question is no, then as cliche as that sounds, you might need to check your carer.
Your carer. I like that. Your carer. But it's like the heart's so deceptive. Like it's like, I wrestle with this all the time. Like sometimes it's really hard to know, like, how do I actually feel about something? And you can like wrestle with your own heart, and you can kind of like really easily deceive yourself, but you do have to start with actually caring. And you might think you care, but to your point, it doesn't actually come out in any actionable items. Then I think you have to question how much you actually do care.
Yeah.
And it's like creating that ethos, creating that culture environment. And honestly, like, I think one of the things that hearing you talk that out is that you can't know something about somebody. You can't know about their lives unless you learn to be a good question asker. Because if you're always exhaling and never, you're always a talker and never a listener, it's impossible to get to know much about somebody unless they just absolutely dump on you, which most people are not comfortable doing. And so if you don't learn the art of asking good questions about people, you're never going to get to know them, and you're never going to get to know your employees. And admittedly, like, the culture of your business matters, because if you're working for Elon or a really hard driving company, and that is the tone in your company, you put off a sense of like, dude, there is no time to talk about anything personal. There's just no time for it. And they just intuitively know that as employees. Like, dude, I'm not bringing up personal life. Like, the only thing that matters around here is winning. And the only thing that matters is like getting that project done or getting that product built. And you just put that off, which I know I can be really guilty of that. Like, I don't stop and maybe smell the roses or have business productive conversations as much as I should. But asking good questions, simple question like, hey man, how's everything going? And you just pause and let them. I mean, dude, I'm not that great at this, but I have had those kind of conversations, and all of a sudden you just see like a little.
I think that's about all it takes.
Puddle starting to pool up right here, and you're like, oh wow, that you just hit a nerve, and like that's a great door opener,
100%, man.
I feel like you're really good at that, by the way. You seem to foster this really well.
Well, on the CVI scale, I have a really high merchant, and I'm introverted, so I think I'm like very in tune with like the emotional energy in the room, and I think I end up asking because I care, and then when they do answer, and typically, like you're saying, it's crazy how often you get that kind of response from just a simple question. And then I can't help but dive into it with them and want to help, because I also I want to solve problems for people. I think it comes naturally, but yeah, if you're care, like, let's say you do care, then the question still, because I would say, as you just pointed out, maybe more naturally, I care about that stuff and I ask about it, but then there's still the like, well, how far do I take it? Like, do I just dump the gospel on them when they, the tear falls down their face and they're like, man, finances are tough. And you're like, well, Jesus is the answer.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Like that's not always, well, it could be effective. I don't know, but there's still the question of like, how do I work my way into that conversation, which maybe is less of a business owner, less specifically a business owner topic or conversation, more just do you know how to share your story and how to share the gospel? You have a strategy for it, which if you're a business owner and your goal is to do business's mission and you haven't exercised that'd be a good thing to go and figure out. And that's kind of, thankfully there's a lot of resources for that, just like on evangelism out there. I know I've gone through it at church, like, in groups, like working through that, flexing that muscle.
But, well, I you're right. It's like, you don't want to be that guy, and you might say, well, you can't share enough, and it's like, people need to hear the good news. Like, yeah, they do. But I think just in the way God has made the world, there's also just realities of human interaction and human social appropriateness and whatnot, where it's like the guys that are the guys that go down the street, the street preacher guys, which I'm not totally opposed to street preaching, but the style of street preaching, which is like these giant signs that are like, you're a wretched sinner and you're going to hell. It's just like, I don't think you're going to get too many conversations started if that's your posture in your workplace, and if you're just that overt, just Christian jerk, if you will. I don't even know how to label it, but there is a line. I think what's coming to mind is, which would be indicative of what Christ spoke about, which is, if you're putting off love, that's a good place to start, versus putting off condemnation. If you're putting off love and like, I care about you and I want to, and that's the tone in your office and the tone that's coming out of the door of your office, people are going to pick up on that. And I think you don't have to do a lot more than that,
Yeah, I think that, like, prime example, as it should be, is Christ that comes to mind when you say that. Like, if you think about when people came to him for healing, when people came to him that were hurting, sometimes he didn't even heal them, for one. So, but if you examine how Christ used those opportunities, there was also always a ton of compassion, a ton of like listening, a ton of love. It was clear that he cared, and like I said, sometimes he healed them, sometimes he didn't, but his life was the message. He was on a mission, and he was preaching, and he had a word, and his life was an example, the ultimate example. But he wasn't always directly like preaching at people that came to him. And I feel like oftentimes that wasn't the case at all. It was like the context was bigger scale where his message was being told. And one-on-one, it was a lot of just like love and there for people that were hurting. And so if you display, I feel like that's pretty well sums up, if I was just going to directly answer this question about how I've seen you and I've tried to implement doing this in the work environment, it does just come down to like caring for people, being there for them, trying to help them, being generous with them, being there for them, putting off love. And then your life is the answer to the why are you treating me this way? Why does it feel different here? They should know, everyone should know, and you shouldn't have to overtly say it, that you're a follower of Christ, and they should learn that over time being in your business, and it should just come off of you. I think that's probably the most powerful way of being successful with this in your business. Hey guys, thank you for watching today's episode of the Vertical Business Podcast. If you want to listen to more vertical business content, you can find us on YouTube, Apple Music, Spotify, and we are also now available on X, formerly known as Twitter. So if you guys want to go give us a follow over there, it would mean a lot, as well as subscribe to us on all the other channels. In addition to the Vertical Business Podcast, you probably hear Jeff and I talk a lot about Sparrow, kingdom-minded giving. If you are interested more in what we are doing over at Sparrow, you want to subscribe to our newsletter, you want to get in contact with Jeff and I for any reason, we would love if you would go and visit the Sparrow website at gosparrow.com. Sparrow is spelled S-P-E-I-R-O. And over there, again, you can interact with us at a deeper level, as well as get access to the materials we talk about on the podcast. We look forward to seeing you guys there. Thanks.